Welcome back, everybody, to America's Mom. I am your host, Sharona Bishop. I am America's Mom, and I'm so glad to be here with you guys. Now, it's not because there's anything of perfection associated with the title of America's Mom. If you know me, you know that is far from the truth. But what is it about being an American mother? It is the principles of liberty, of freedom, foundational truths, the securing the civic responsibility of securing this country for generations to come through the foundation of a constitutional republic. And that's my focus. I don't teach you how to train your kids. I don't tell you how to discipline them. I don't do any of that stuff. But I always point out issues that are going on in the lives of American parents across this country and try to bring to us in a digestible manner the issues that really matter that are happening maybe on a large scale. We can simplify them so that we actually can understand them. So much of the media, so much of policy is not intended for regular person consumption. What I mean is they don't want you to know what they're doing. Okay. A lot of their legislation reads like some foreign language and we have no idea what they're talking about. And some of today's show is going to be a little bit like that. So I'm going to take the time to break it down because I learned doing it this way. This is how I figured out. Like I remember I heard the word gerrymandering like 50 times before I finally just went and looked it up. I had no idea what gerrymandering was. I was like, Jerry, who's Jerry? Why is he meandering? I have no idea what is going on here. I did not understand anything. And so sometimes I think that we're expected to know what's happening, and so we just skirt past these really important words and ideas that are directing our policy. And I want to slow down just a little bit today because there are huge, huge consequences for the Supreme Court ruling that just came down out of the Louisiana case regarding gerrymandering and redrawing of district lines for election purposes. Okay. So I want to slow everything down because I really want us to understand and comprehensively walk away going, I know what they're doing now. I get it. Because political activists play games, and those games are not about American people winning. It's about ideologies winning. It's about keeping people in a particular class, a particular system to keep nursing the teat of government. That's what it's all about. And so there's really just two groups of people. There's those of us that want to live free. We want to self determine. We want to self regulate. We want to go after the pursuits that we want for our family, for our life. We're fine with me being poor is not a crime. Being poor does not mean you're a bad parent, but living off of the government is option number 2. And when people do that, they tend to support whatever is feeding them, right? We support the things that are giving us what we need. And all too often in America, we've taken away that self-reliance, that independence, that pride in providing for your own family. You may not have much, but you fought for every inch of it. That's how I grew up versus what we are seeing nowadays where people cannot get enough free stuff. Edible undies, do not forget, edible undies were on the EBT card list on Amazon. I don't care what they tell you. By the way, they tried to say that was fake. If you go Google it, it was not fake. I found it, I posted it, and I alerted HHS that that was what was going on, you guys. They had edible undies on the EBT list. Okay. So, I mean, people just trying to get whatever they can out of a system that was never intended to work this way. A constitutional republic means that you are going to be self reliant. You will be interdependent with those in your community, in your neighborhood, in your just your local town. Totally fine. Great. But on this federal scale, it is out of control. I want to remind you, we do not have Doge anymore. We do not have an internal audit system going on in the federal government right now. And that is a shame. It's really, really disappointing. And there are so many reasons for that. But hundreds of millions of dollars are allocated to organizations, to so called private public partnerships that are supposed to be doing the will of the American people, and they're not. Or maybe they are a tiny little bit, but the majority of what they're doing is enriching themselves. Now, you can't blame somebody for trying. I mean, you see it all the time and you're like, "Oh, well, they tried, they came up with a clever scheme," but it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong to be taking taxpayer dollars and using that as your source of enrichment. Go out and produce something, create something, do something that benefits your community that also gives you the wealth that you're seeking. That is supposed to be the American dream, not figuring out how you can get your edible undies on the EBT list. And I encourage people, by the way, to go check the EBT qualified items from time to time. Starbucks, you should not be on the EBT qualified list, by the way. That should not be happening, but it is. It's on there. And yes, I will complain about that too. So, what are we doing here? as parents in this country. We're looking at whether or not we can secure a country for the future of our children where they can live the most free of any place in the world, where they can self determine, they can choose. And the only way to really secure that is to know that our election platforms really are secure. They are honest. We're having real, honest elections. So I want to start with this breaking news from the SCOTUS. Let's go ahead and put that up just so you can see how pretty it is. Harmeet Dillon had a huge role to play in this. You guys might remember when all of the gerrymandering news was coming out. She was choosing a different clever route to try to secure elections so that they were real, real authentic elections that represented the people that live in these areas. And for decades, the districting lines had not been looked at. They had not been compared to both state law and federal law. And so what was happening was you had politically based district lines that were for whatever advantageous party in that area could get these lines drawn to support their ideology. So, for example, in the state of Texas, we saw the undoing of Jasmine Crockett after the law was actually followed in the districting lines of the state of Texas. So, as it was when Jasmine Crockett was elected, those were illegal, racially divided district lines. They were not convenient. They looked like a kid took a crayon and like just kind of, went like this. There was nothing reasonable about the lines. They weren't taking into consideration the population that needed to be within those lines in order to have their own district. And it was unreasonable. It did not, it conflicted with Texas state law and federal law, but nobody had looked at that in decades. It was very clever on the part of Attorney General Harmeet Dillon. And I was watching it happen in real time. And I was watching the politicians here in the state of Texas lose their minds. Their brains were like leaking out. Like they were like, how did you catch us? How can you possibly have known to go after this? We thought we had you fooled because this is the deep state. It's not just Democrats, it's those who are benefiting from those who are in positions of power to sell their edible undies on the EBT list. Okay. Crony capitalism exists. I am all for capitalism, but I'm also very, very aware that people take advantage of the system and they figure out how to milk and work whatever political party is in play and whatever is needed for that political party that is in play. It's just how it is. Okay. I'm telling you all the truth. This is how it goes. You look for people who have tremendous loyalty to their country and you hope at large they do. But when you see what's gone on just in the state of Texas, for example, with Jasmine Crockett's district, and you see the impact that it had on the people who live there. Democrat policies are the very worst policies to live under. They strip you of your power. They strip you of your personal empowerment, your ability to go and do for yourself because they try to give you everything for free to buy your vote. Okay, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. So this is so brilliant. The summary of the ruling. This was Louisiana versus Callis in a 6-3 ruling for the majority. The Supreme Court, and I'm just going to read this. This was I love this. This is Grok's interpretation. Just so you know, I want you to know. This is because it was a 92-page ruling. We're not going to go through all of that. The Supreme Court held that Louisiana's 2022 congressional map creating a second majority Black district was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander because Section 2, and we're going to get into Section 2 today, what it means and how it has been weaponized, by the way, of the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act did not require the state to draw that extra district using race as the predominant factor, lacked a compelling interest under the 14th Amendment. So just to break it down for you, basically what they did was they were again trying to build new lines based off of Black population that they believed would vote Democrat so they could gain an extra seat. That's it. That's all. That's what they were doing. That's really simple. They were using race as a reason to draw new lines, believing those people would be their most likely voters to get them in office. I think that's sick. I think that's really disturbing and disgusting. It's gross. It's so gross. And the Supreme Court is in agreement. So, how does this affect the rest of the country? Well, the Voting Right Act now is becoming more and more narrow as it should be. Okay. This precedent is based off of those who are screaming race conscious districting, redistricting. States, especially in the South, but let me just tell you, those lines are drawn by poverty, by economic boundaries in other states like Colorado. Okay, so maybe you guys are, maybe they're doing it by race in the South, but in other areas north, it's going to be economic lines because we know that poverty mentality is really what we're dealing with here. Poverty mentality seeks out a hand to feed them rather than a fishing pole. It's just, I grew up in it. I know it. I know what it looks like. I know. I know. So economics drives a lot of these lines as well in the north. But anyway, in the South is where this one is coming from, obviously Louisiana. So now they're going to face stricter scrutiny when drawing majority minority districts, potentially allowing for more compact maps that could shift 5 to 12 House seats towards Republicans in the upcoming cycles, including the 2026 midterms. That would be fantastic. Future challenges are definitely going to be considered, and maps will be done accordingly. It's no secret, and I want you to know it is, there are heads exploding over this ruling. This is a huge, huge deal, okay? Because the Democrats have owned the southern districts because they draw these fake lines that are built off of the populace they believe will vote for them rather than the representation of the actual community. Okay. This is, we've always said the outcomes are not reflective of the people who live there. Well, they are if you're buying the votes of the people who live there and you've managed to draw special lines that just enclose those exact people who you believe you can buy off to vote for you, or you can buy their ballot. That's very much a real option as well. We've seen that in the undercover videos of homeless areas in mass that are selling their ballots. That's a whole nother issue. That's how California does it. Okay. So that's a whole nother issue. But it's no secret that there are heads exploding over this ruling because it is going to take the power away from the left, who has been using economic disparity and ideology to advance them throughout the country. We know they're not reflective of us, and now we know why. Okay. Mark Elias. Mark Elias, of course, he is panicking today. The Supreme Court took this case, and this is going to end his divisive, destructive, anti unity business model that he's been running. He abused the private right of action clause in the Voting Rights Act to file lawsuits around the country. We have seen these lawsuits repeatedly happen in order to change election laws that would benefit his Democrat cult. That is what he's up to. No vote, remember, no voter ID because Black people don't have IDs. I just can't even, on its face, it's so racist what Mark Elias has done and the arguments that have been made to soften our, protection around our vote. It's so racist. I can't even believe it. Like, I've never met a Black person who doesn't have an ID. I can't even, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's so demoralizing. The way that Mark Elias views minority groups and views Black people is so disgusting. This is the Democrat Party. That's how they view them. That's how they view Black people. That's how they view the economically, the poor. You're really just a means to an end for them. Okay, so basically, here's what he would do. He would, no voter ID. We want to do the mass mail-in ballots because people are too stupid to show up on election day. That kind of stuff. The private right of action in the Voting Rights Act allows for individual citizens and for organizations rather than just the attorney general to sue in federal court to enforce voting protections. So what Mark Elias would do is he would take advantage of that. And he would send his minions in to find people who felt they were disenfranchised to start suing the federal government to do those very things. Drop voter ID, expand voter mail-in ballots, not allow for cameras at the ballot box. That's another one. Don't forget that. That was a BLM piece of lawsuit. Yeah, don't forget that one too. That was a big deal. Okay, so he would have these individuals, these citizens and organizations, rather than just the attorney general, they would be able to sue in federal court to enforce these quote voting protections. And it's really critical. It was critical for challenging discriminatory laws, although recent court rulings, such as the Eighth Circuit in 2023, have absolutely narrowed the application regarding Section 2. And we're going to go over what Section 2 says, which prohibits voting discrimination. But see, they set up the model to begin with. They literally, by designing these boundaries, the gerrymandering lines that are designed for the political ideology to get the most votes, secure the most votes for your party, they right out the gate were discriminating by doing that. They were discriminating against those who were not in their party. And I don't know why this is such a mind-blowing concept. It's exactly what they've been doing. So the right of action, the right for an individual to say, hey, I feel disenfranchised in my vote. I am suing because of X, Y, or Z. It's crucial for the enabling of the Voting Rights Act to actually function. It allows for swift challenges, should you see something, to voter suppression tactics, but man, has it been abused. And here's the thing, those of you who are following the Tina Peters case, let me just tell you, every right to action was shut down. Every person who tried to sue Colorado for voter disenfranchisement when it was exposed that Dominion voting machines was deleting actual election information, election documentation within those machines. When it was revealed there was the SQL 2 server program that was actually, I call it the cannibal program. It was consuming the daily reports within the machines of what was happening with your vote. And every person who tried to sue for information, to get a fair judgment, to have some kind of investigation, to do a full audit into the machines was completely disenfranchised and shut down and told no. People have asked repeatedly, why wasn't there that nobody's ever brought any lawsuits about the elections? That's not true. Every lawsuit that was brought forward by someone on the quote right or conservative or saying, hey, something's not right here, they were dismissed without prejudice, meaning you could take it to another judge, but that judge didn't want to hear it and wasn't going to rule on it. It's just amazing to me how if you were on the Democrat side here and you were trying to thwart the natural correct district lines that would be accurate representation of the community by doing these gerrymandering lines that would only bring votes from the people who support what you're doing, right? It's not a fair representation of the public. It's just you isolated it to get what you wanted. All of those were heard, and they would be heard with such urgency and decided on so swiftly. And it has worked to completely erode the trust in our election systems across this country. Our belief in the elections, our, our belief in the outcome of the election. This is all part of that. They have worked so hard to make the American people insecure about our election processes that people wildly, massively did not turn out for this recent special elections that we had in Texas. We were down 15% almost across the board. That's unheard of, especially with such a popular candidate like Ken Paxton. That Senate race is really important. But the left has repeatedly used civil society organizations. Remember, too, this is Mark Elias. This is what he does. He uses civil organizations to file lawsuits that will chip away at the actual fairness of our voting districts. So, for example, if they needed a Hispanic organization, well, you've got LULAC, LULAC, or in Colorado, Voices Unidas. Let's say that you need a minority group. Well, hey, they'll just call the NAACP and say, who do you have? Who do you have? We need to find somebody quick who can file a lawsuit for us so we can get this thing rolling and we can further diminish and squash the electorate. That's what they've done. They're not pro-America. They're not pro a future for our children. They are whatever the party needs at the moment so they can sell their edible undies under the EBT program. That's what I'm talking. No allegiance to the country, no thoughts for the future of a free nation. And that's why this is such an incredible victory. Because when you talk about, are the Patriots in charge? I don't know. But I know this is a really great ruling. This is accurate. This is fair. This is going to bring tremendous amounts of fairness to our country. When we look, I just want to make sure before I get into Virginia, okay, we're going to talk about Virginia for just a minute, but I want to make sure that people understand what Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act really is. And again, Section 2 allows for a citizen. It allows for a citizen or an organization rather than just your attorney general. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Individuals should be able to come forward and say, I was disenfranchised. But you know what? We didn't see any relief in Arizona when individuals came forward and said they were disenfranchised. We didn't see any relief in Colorado. We saw very little relief in the state of Texas and Dallas as people were watching the poll numbers, the numbers of votes coming in on the tabulator where there were no ballots behind it. We saw no injunctive relief there at all. It has only been for those who are screaming foul, who are part of the left. and part of the leftist associations. And that is extremely troubling, which makes this ruling all the more sweet because America is going to have a chance. We're going to have a chance to get real representation into office. This is one part of the puzzle that needed to be solved. Now I want to move to, so just remember, that is a crucial piece. Section 2 is really important. We don't want to disenfranchise the individual, but people like Mark Elias and his organization have been using people, and they've been using that clause to advance their agenda. So now the perimeters are going to be very, very narrow on that interpretation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And you're not just going to be able to do whatever you want using the term racial, well, how do they call it? They call it racial, race conscious redistricting. So racist. Are we America? Are we are we a united country? E pluribus unum? Are we one? Not with people like Mark Elias willing to divide and destroy this country for a political agenda, for edible undies on the EBT list. I'm telling you, like somebody, the advancement of a lot of these things is about corporate sales and a public-private partnership with federal government in order to get money to enrich yourself. That's what a lot of these things are for. And they're not good things. They're not things that are advancing and helping our country. They're things that are helping a very small group of people grow their bank account. Okay, so I want to move in and move on to what's happening in Virginia, because I think this is really, this happened before this ruling in Louisiana, but it's extremely important. Virginia is under siege. There is no doubt about it. And I'm going to go through what has happened under Abigail, the new governor of Virginia. I'm going to go Spanberger. I'm going to go through everything that's happened. She is very much a Jared Polis of Colorado times 2. She might be on steroids though, but she's about done everything that Jared Polis did in his first 90 days as governor in the state of Colorado back in 2019. She has fast tracked with executive orders as well as signing into legislation radical, radical stuff. So when they were trying to just recently, I'm going to go through it all, but when they were trying to do the exact same thing, right? They wanted to redistrict for the purposes of gerrymandering to gain the votes that they would need, that they would know they would have from their political allies, right? Probably in these organizations, probably economically challenged. You know what I'm saying? They're taking advantage of people, and they wanted specific lines drawn to promote their agenda so they could get even more power. Although I don't know how much more power the Democrats can hold in Virginia. They have everything in Virginia. They have all of the major state offices, just like in Colorado, just like in California, just like in Arizona. They hold almost, I think we only have one Republican that is of any standing in Arizona. So here's what happened to them, though. The courts have come through with a reasonable ruling. This is a very, very big deal. The Supreme Court of Virginia has denied a request from Democrats and the state to pause last week's ruling by a Tazewell County judge, which blocked the state board of elections from certifying the results of the April 21st redistricting referendum because it was illegal. It was unconstitutional. A Tazewell County judge declared that the State Department of Elections could not move forward with the certifying of the results of that April 21 referendum until the Supreme Court of Virginia had weighed in. Then the Democrats and the state requested this emergency stay, which would have allowed the Department of Elections to move forward with the certifications while the appeals process played out. So they're like, well, let's just assume it's going to get done and we'll just keep moving forward. But the court said absolutely not. The Supreme Court of Virginia ruled on Tuesday, just yesterday, that the Department of Elections cannot do that. Everything must be paused until there is an official judicial ruling, thankfully. Obviously, the Democrats are going to appeal this, but they cannot move their agenda forward, their gerrymandering, redistricting agenda forward to claiming these redistricting lines to benefit their party. Thank God, because here's what I'm going to go through this list of all the things that Abigail Spanberger has already done. Why does this story even matter? This is the birthplace of America. Virginia is the birthplace of America. And when you hear what they have done to erode constitutional freedoms and protections, God-given rights in the state of Virginia in the first 30 days of Abigail Spanberger's reign of terror, you're going to be shocked, because I don't think people realize all that she has done in this very short amount of time. but I'm going to tell it to you right now. She took power. She took power and she is wielding it like a total communist. So here it is. Are you guys ready for this? We're going to start with your gun control bills that have passed. And if you remember in 2020, the largest gun rally in the country took place. I was there for that. My brother came out. He had just retired from the military. It was his first um, rally ever. Protest. It was a protest really because you had the governor at that time. He was going to allow for post-birth abortions. Yeah, post-birth, 20 up to 28 days. I don't know, whatever the parents decide. They can just leave the baby there to die. I don't know. It's up to the parents. And of course, total gun confiscation. This guy, I can't even remember his name now, but the governor of Virginia tried to pull that in 2020, and the outrage was unbelievable. Thousands and thousands of protesters showed up strapped with their ammo, strapped with their very large guns, without any incidents whatsoever, just freedom loving people who demonstrated they certainly had the personal restraint to carry a gun, and they would exercise that right, that God given right to protect themselves from a tyrannical government. That's what was so crazy. You know, when we're looking at the Second Amendment, these things are not for your neighbor or for hunting. This is for a tyrannical, out of control government. And that's why they keep trying to take our guns, because they do not want us to hold them accountable the way that our founders did, the way that they held their government accountable. They do not want to face that kind of judgment. So here it is. Here's what's here. Here it is. I'm just going to go through the list, guys. Here we go. First of all, this is again within the first 30 days. She passed, these are the legislative things that she signed into law. We'll get into her executive orders in just a minute. Assault weapon sale purchase ban, signed legislation, includes there is exception for certain hunting guns, restricting future sale, manufacture, and purchase of certain semi-automatic assault style, that which is not a thing, firearms and high capacity magazines over 15 rounds. Ghost guns are banned, the manufacture, sale, and possession of untraceable firearms that lack serial numbers. Can I repeat? I don't need to repeat it. They want tracking on every weapon you've ever purchased. Why would we give the government that? Why would we give the government that? We should not. We're not supposed to be cataloging our gun purchases to our federal government or to our state government. It's none of their business. Shall not be infringed. It's none of their business. It's insane that this is where we are at right now, that we're willing to tell the government what firearms we own. It's wrong. It's literally anti-constitutional. Age restricting increase has gone from 18 to 21 to purchase certain firearms. So don't worry, kids. You guys can go fight and die in whatever wars they're planning for you, but you can't own a firearm. Literally makes no sense, because if you're 18 years old going into the military, you're going to be having a lot of firearms. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Of course, there will be exceptions for military or law enforcement, because those are the only people they want to have guns, right? Because they are submissive to government. They're submissive to government. Okay. All right. Emergency clause was added that made the restriction effective immediately upon signing that piece of legislation, by the way. So if you are 18, 19, or 20 and you own a gun in Virginia, you are now a criminal. You're a criminal. Firearm industry liability, signed legislation allowing manufacturers and dealers to be held legally accountable for negligence that contributes to gun violence. So somebody else shot the gun, but Smith and Wesson, you are responsible now. This is a great tactic to take down the manufacturers of our weaponry. That's amazing, pretty amazing. And that is a law in the state of Virginia. You all you manufacturers of guns will be held accountable. Note to self, do not sell to anybody living in Virginia. Safe storage transport enacted a requirement. This is crazy. Again, this is crazy, because even for personal protection, they enacted a requirement for handguns to be locked away when left in vehicles, and strengthened safe gun storage regulations in homes. This all sounds like a great idea on its face, until you are the one that has been followed and you jump in your car to defend yourself, and you've got someone beating your window in, or whatever the situation may be, someone who's come into your house at night while you try to remember what your freaking code was. I I can't with this. This is crazy. They closed the intimate partner loophole, prohibited individuals convicted of misdemeanor domestic violent crimes from possessing a firearm. With that, domestic violence crimes, misdemeanor domestic violence crimes, You guys, that can be a whole slew of things along with false allegations. This is, again, these are things that are completely prohibitive of American citizens, and it ought not be so, shall not be infringed. Each case should be considered independently, not a blanket piece of legislation like this. This is not good for the populace. It's certainly not good when you think of the attack on men for the last 10 years or more. Assault weapon sale, purchase ban, signed legislation, often we don't care about that. Restricted the future sale, manufacture, and purchase of certain semi automatic, which is also not a thing. Assault style, not a thing. Firearms. So let's just say it the way it actually is, the purchase of certain firearms in high capacity magazines over 15 rounds. I said that. Okay, let's move down here. Self storage and the partner loophole. Okay. I want to go over all of the executive, sorry, for some reason it didn't make it over. We're going to just refer here. Okay, all of the executive pieces of legislation that she has signed on day one. Gosh, there was so much here. I didn't even get into the social policies. Let me just go through these really fast. These are more laws that were signed into law right away. Reproductive rights constitutional referendum, and this means that they are going to enshrine it in their constitution. Reproductive rights that include abortion, contraception, and fertility treatments into the Virginia Constitution. You have the right to all of these things. The New Deal times 5 on steroids. The Marriage Equality Restoration signed legislation to remove the defunct ban on same-sex marriage from Virginia Constitution. They are sending it to voters for a referendum. We all know how that's going to probably end, especially if they're still continuing to use machine votes. We'll see. Voting rights restoration. This is very interesting. They've enacted legislation that automatically restores voting rights to individuals who have completed their felony sentences. Let me just remind you, though, that if you had a misdemeanor domestic violence charge, they are restricting you from ever owning guns in the state of Virginia. But if you are a felon, you can vote. Okay. ICE cooperation limits signed House, it was House Bill 1441 and 783, limiting the collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE by imposing strict conditions. They're not allowing for conversation. Now, here's the cool thing about that. These things are going to get passed up to the federal government, and Virginia is going to find themselves with zero federal dollars in their accounts. They're going to find all of their universities drained of all future funding, of all agreements of funding, nixed, completely gone. Virginia is going to experience what Colorado is experiencing right now. They're going to have every penny taken from them that can possibly be taken because clearly they have so much money. They have such progressive ideas. I'm sure they can find a way to fund all of this because you have to fund it. You have to fund the application of all of these laws. It's going to be a lot of fun finding every dollar that can be stripped from Virginia. Of course, they legalized marijuana. We all know that. It's all legal now. Great. Yeah, gateway to apathy, to massive drug use. Just go to Colorado and you'll see what happens. Go to Colorado. Economic policies. She set a $15 minimum wage. Public employees collective bargaining now. Authorize the collective bargaining for public employees. Bunch of entitled people running around saying they don't make enough and they'll be boycotting. Can't boycott soon enough, honestly, for these companies that are going to be foolish enough to participate in this type of nonsense. If you're going to be foolish enough to participate in this, I guess you're going to have what's coming for you. I really hope that businesses are seeking legal counsel or moving their businesses out of the state of Virginia. Colorado's lost well over 200 businesses this last year, another 100 left just in the last 6 months. I expect that there is going to be a massive departure of business coming out of Virginia. If it wasn't for the fact that it's right by DC, it probably would have happened sooner. But I believe there's going to be a massive exodus after this. Paycheck fairness. Signed measures are cracking down on pharmacy benefit managers and rising prescription drug costs. State contracting changes. States contract toward minority-owned businesses. DEI. They're going to be required to do DEI before anyone who actually should be considered for contracts. They're going to look at all of the diversity, equity, inclusive people, and they have to choose those contracts first before just regular, everyday, quality businesses that have been around for a minute. Great. Again, you're going to see a mass exodus of business. Here's the executive actions. These are the things she signed into law on day one. Number one, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. We spent time talking about this because it is so detrimental to our country. and to the voting um, representation of the country. I mean, we're not going to go there again today, but massive. She did that day, basically day one. She signed orders that rescinded former Governor Youngkin's orders that required local law enforcement to cooperate with federal civil immigration enforcement. So Virginia is effectively a sanctuary state now. Affordability directive, she ordered state agencies to identify immediate policy changes to reduce the costs for residents. Such a crazy thing since she is going to be enforcing, she's just signed a ton of legislation into place that is going to strip neighborhoods from their value. She's the things that she's doing right now are going to raise the cost of living so massively in that state. When you create sanctuary status for illegals, everything goes up because the cost to fund these people, they're immediately put on welfare, they're immediately given public housing, everything goes up. Your schools will go down, your quality of education will massively drop down, while the cost to educate these children is massively higher because you have not prepared for the reality that you're dealing with, most of the time single language, not even dual language, non-English speaking students. There's so much here. We've watched it happen in Colorado. I guess Abigail Spanberger does not learn from history. She is repeating it in the state of Virginia, and I fully expect it to go the same way that Colorado has gone. The only thing that we can say right now that gives me any hope about Virginia is the fact that the Virginia Supreme Court has stepped in and said, we are not going to honor your redistricting lines. This is illegal. And you also cannot move forward. You will wait for your appeal. And we can just pray that the appeal doesn't pass. But this is what we're at. This is what they're doing. They're so creative in destroying our country. They're not here to support us, defend us. That's not what they're here for. And you can see this so vividly by what was just exposed with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, I sat down with Kimberly Fletcher this morning. We had a conversation. I'm going to play for you in just a few moments here, but I want you to remember these are the people that have told us we hate each other, we're racist, we're far right. Gosh, I can't even remember all the things they've called us. They've called us so many things. We're far right domestic terrorists. This is the same organization that dubbed Moms for America as a domestic terrorist organization, and parents across the country. They echoed that rhetoric that parents who were challenging school boards, challenging COVID policies, were also domestic terrorists. There are so many great organizations, including President Trump himself, who were named by the Southern Poverty Law Center as domestic terrorists. And again, they waged lawfare against conservative organizations across this country and conservative people across this country. The branding of domestic terrorists, you guys, is one of the worst things that could have happened during the Biden administration, especially because it caused severe alienation by those who were afraid, which was the majority of the population. You have about 85% of the population that operates at a frequency that's so low they don't have courage. It's literally like this is a scientific study actually that's been done. And literally about 85% of humans don't even operate at the courage frequency. They don't have the courage to stand up for themselves or anyone else. And when you factor into that a government that was weaponizing itself against American citizens and against the Constitution, using organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center to do it, and then we found out they were funding the actual terrorists. It's unbelievable. I want you to watch this Kash Patel, his press conference. We're just going to watch about 2 minutes of this, and then we're going to turn it over to my interview with Kimberly Fletcher, the founder of Moms for America, who is finally going to see some justice after everything the SPLC did to annihilate Moms for America as an authority organization representing parents across this country. Take a listen.
We're here today is to announce what the general just told you. The Southern Poverty Law Center, in a massive, sweeping indictment, has been charged with allegations of fraud and using the banking system to perpetrate that fraud. I just want to talk about a couple of brief things here. The Southern Poverty Law Center themselves advertise to raise money to dismantle violent extremist groups for a period of at least a decade. They use their donor network to raise money to purportedly dismantle violent extremist groups. However, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups. I just want to say that again. They used the fraudulently raised money by lying to their donor network, thousands of Americans, to go ahead and actually pay the leadership of these supposed violent extremist groups. The groups, as the general laid out, include the Ku Klux Klan, the United Klans of America, Unite to Right, National Alliance, the National Socialist Movement, the Aryan Nation Motorcycle Club, and the National Socialist Party of America, and also the American Front. In at least one of these matters, our investigation revealed that funds were used to facilitate the commission of further state and federal offenses, totaling over $3 million. Furthermore, our investigation revealed that the Southern Poverty Law Center, on top of perpetuating this widespread, decade-long, multi-million-dollar fraud, conducted more criminal activity. They attempted to hide their criminal activity from our financial banking network. They set up shell companies and entities around America so that the financial institutions that we rely on as everyday Americans were deceived in believing that money was not coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center in the perpetration of this scheme and fraud, but rather fictitious entities they stood up to perpetuate this ongoing fraud. This is a serious and egregious violation of a group that purported to dismantle violent extremist groups, but in turn actually only fueled the hatred. This is an important case brought by President Trump's administration. We're thankful for the president for his leadership and funding of not just the FBI and DOJ, but his commitment to go out there and wipe out fraud and conspiracy and waste and abuse wherever it occurs, including the Southern Poverty Law Center. Even though this money was made to appear to be coming from legitimate people and legitimate entities, we at the FBI, with our great partners at the Department of Justice and in the state of Alabama, were able to comb through a decade worth of material, a scheme that took a decade to build, so that we were able to follow the money, because money never lies, and they got caught. As the Attorney General said, these charges are varying, they are widespread and wide-ranging, and this investigation is very much ongoing. Today, we're here to announce the charges of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and this investigation and the individuals who are responsible will be brought to justice. Thank you, General.
All right. We're going to be sharing with you our interview and breakdown with Kimberly Fletcher. And again, she's in DC right now. You're going to want to listen to the entirety of this interview, because one of the most frequently questions I have had is, what are we doing about CPS? And Moms for America has made an official stand and is actively working to change legislation and allocation of funding across the entire United States to CPS. But first, let's take a listen to her experience with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Well, guys, to tell us more about what it's like to be the victim and falsely accused by the Southern Poverty Law Center, especially with all of these allegations now and this investigation underway, the indictments are out. Kimberly Fletcher with Moms for America has a completely different perspective. I believe you were called a domestic terrorist, named a domestic terrorist organization by the SPLC.
Yeah, an anti-government hate group, extremists, domestic terrorists. Yeah, they had a few labels for us.
First of all, I want to go back to 2020. I believe that's around the time that they gave you that designation. And at that time, it had massive implications across the country. It made you a target for the Biden administration. Your organization was surveilled. It led to parents being surveilled across the country. What was the impact for your organization when they decided to put you in that category?
Well, everybody who deplatformed us and services that were canceled, they all specifically pointed to the fact that we were listed as a hate group on the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we'd had multiple different documents that stated that. There was an article that was written, I think it was in 2023, by townhall.com, and it was exposing all of this. Heritage Action Foundation did a whole entire dossier on it. And so we had all of our claims that were listed. We lost everything from insurance to payment systems. Our website was shut down at one point. We were deplatformed from social media sites, Vimeo of all places. They shut us down. That was where all our educational videos were. And we had just paid for the whole entire year And they sent us a week later, they sent us a letter, an email stating that they were canceling our account and it was never going to be reopened again. And we tried to work with them and they were adamant, no. And they specifically said, we will not work with hate groups. You're listed on the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so I said, okay, fine. Well, then give us our money back. And they said, well, that goes against our corporate policies.
Oh, Vimeo, Vimeo, Vimeo. They will, I'm just wondering the grounds for a lawsuit now that SPLC has been exposed, they've been funding the very people they say they're fighting against, the KKK, alt-right groups that are not actually conservatives or have anything to do with America. They are terrorist organizations
Right.
that SPLC was funding. What's going to be the move for Moms for America? Are we looking at a legal battle ahead?
Well, we're watching to see what the DOJ does because you have to have certain documentation to be able to prove defamation. Defamation is a very hard thing to prove. So the DOJ, we're hoping, is going to prove it for us, and then justice will be served. I mean, the amount of money that we lost, the credibility that we lost. I think they need to pay. And with their DOJ is going to go after them, maybe they're going to go after them for a bucket of money that they're going to put somewhere where it can, give some money back to those of us who have lost so much. But us
Yeah.
outside of the money, it's really the reputation thing. I mean, parents are afraid. When they labeled us as a hate group and put us on their hate group list on their website, we'd lost leaders because they were afraid they were being targeted. They were getting harassing emails saying, "We know where your kids are. We know where you live." I mean, the threats that we were receiving were obscene, and the fact that they're labeling us a hate group right alongside the Ku Klux Klan, and all the while they're funding all of those organizations and calling us out. But the thing that really got me, Sharona, was after the DOJ press conference and everything went out, they sent a public letter out and said, this is not going to deter us. So they've made it very clear that they're going to keep doing this. So all those who are funding SPLC, I would encourage you to stop funding them if you really do care about radical extremist groups like racist groups and everything, and start supporting organizations like ours that are actually combating those things.
It's really incredible. And the mission of Moms for America is literally to empower mothers to be great parents, to stand up for their kids, and to teach traditional foundational principles. I know that there's so much more we could go into about SPLC, but I want to make sure people have an opportunity to know what your mission is moving forward. You're in DC right now. You're advocating for kids right now. What's the direction of Moms for America at this point, and how can people jump in? What can they be doing to support? I know firsthand what an incredible and powerful organization Moms for America is under your leadership. So where are you guys at now? What are you doing?
Well, we have a couple of projects we're working on. We're doing the US 250 tour, going to all 50 states, because the way that you're going to counter this darkness is with light. And we need kids, families to know what America's about, why it's worth fighting for. And so we are taking the celebration of America's 250th birthday to communities in every state, with a patriotic fair that everybody can get involved with, incredible music. And everybody who's come to these things they're just absolutely awed. And then of course we're going to continue to fight the good fight. We're right here, as I said, as you said, in Washington, D.C. right now. Child Protective Services has become a behemoth. The laws, the funding that has been passed and allocated by Congress has actually funded these monstrosities in each of the states. And it has created government-funded kidnapping and encouraging the growth of these organizations to continue to take children for everything from I disagree and I want a second opinion on a medical case to I didn't affirm my kids because it's absurd, and they're taking their children away. And so we are going after CPS directly, and we are meeting with members of Congress to talk about the two funding sources that created these monstrosities and get them to be stopped funding them.
It is kind of a crazy thing. We don't have any auditing arm anymore, now that we don't have Doge. And so there's funding mechanisms that have been in place for decades that nobody has gone back and looked at again. When was the law created that gave this power and authority to CPS in the first place across the country?
That is a very interesting question. It was in the 1970s. It was CAPTA, C-A-P-T-A. I don't remember what it stands for, Child Protective something. And the idea was to protect children. The federal government needs to stop getting involved in doing things that have to do with the families because you're too far distant from the families to actually help families. So they created it with the best of intentions, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And we're now living in hell. So the CAPTA was passed in the late 1970s. And what it did is it gave funding to the states to create a system that would protect children from abuse and neglect. Unfortunately, they did not define abuse and neglect. And so it's like broad use of the term, and they are kidnapping children for all kinds of crazy reasons and no justifiable reasons. So CAPTA was actually expired in late 90s, early 2000s, but they keep appropriating funds. So they didn't renew it. We don't want it renewed, but they keep appropriating the funds. And so HHS is required to allocate the funds. And then ASFA, American Families something, that was created with the objective, and this was this is Republicans and the Newt Gingrich Congress did this, best of intentions again, and their objective was to get kids out of foster care and into adoptive homes sooner. What it did instead was incentivize the states to kidnap children because they get $4,000 a day per kid for a month for every child that they take. And the longer they're in the system, the more money they make, the more people they hire, the bigger the systems get.
This is the biggest Ponzi scheme ever, but it's at the detriment of our children. It's literally costing children their lives. I think I heard you tell a story recently. What's one of the most extreme stories you've heard of children who've been involved in the foster care system through this payment process of taking other people's children, and the idea that you have to justify your existence, right? These organizations have to justify their existence, so they got to grow their numbers and they've got to bring in more people to execute what their mandate is. What's the worst story or one of the stories that really caused you to be activated? Because this is a new mission that Moms for America has gotten on board with. What was the linchpin?
So really, it was my own case. It's something that I've been fighting for a long time. I have been parents in the past, moms who have lost their children, had them taken away for no reason whatsoever, and our church family got involved and helped with them so that they didn't have to lose their kids. We stayed in their homes and helped monitor them. But my mother-in-law didn't like me. She got very angry with me, and she decided the way to punish me was to call CPS and tell them that I'm a terrible mother. Well, of course, that backfired because my husband was like, you are now a threat to our family and you may not be in our home anymore. If it were not for the fact, the grace of God, and the fact that we had a very good friend that was in the system, I would have lost my children. And once they're in the
That's
system,
often
they don't come out.
accusation. Yeah, absolutely. I
Yes.
think people
And
really
then,
need to
and so
understand that.
yes, it's false accusations all the time. So we did get the linchpin for me was our state director, why we decided to jump on this as an organization. I did not have anyone who could champion this directly, who could put the paperwork together and the things that we needed to do, the scheduling for the members of Congress. And last year, our state director for Iowa, she had false reporting and she fought it. She was able to keep her kids, but she went so far as to create a law where there's penalties for false reporting. And that has become model legislation that we're pushing in all 50 states. So she then connected me with Maureen Steele and Ann Vandersteel, who are good friends of mine. I had no idea that they were involved in this fight, but Maureen Steele had a personal threat with this, and she's just gone all in. And so we created a Family First Coalition with the objective of keeping families together and reunification and looking for relatives instead of just automatically stealing the children. And if you complain or push back or even ask questions, they label you as combative. So by the time they go to the judge in the family court, which is also a joke, they make you sound like Attila the Hun, some axe murderer.
I've watched
And
that.
and
Absolutely.
it's horrible. And the judge does whatever CPS wants. CPS has so much power. And if you can imagine, if you start putting politics and radical ideologies inside of this, what a threat this is. If you don't do what I say, if you don't bow to my rule or my position, I'm going to take your kids away. And that's really where we are.
It absolutely is where we are, and even that ideology, how it's permeated through our judicial system. I mean, the need to be able to hold judges accountable is that has to be fixed as well, because you've got this element of CPS, but then, like you said, the CPS is the gospel to these judges. There's no personal inquiry, there's no thoughtful inquiry about this. It just is, it's done, and the state continues to gain more federal dollars by separating children from their parents. Kimberly, where can people find you, follow you? You guys have a great show also to encourage mothers across the country. How can they get in touch with you?
So our podcast has just reached 1 million, so you can check out our Moms for America podcast. The Mom View, we have incredible topics about this and how you can get involved in solutions, not just listing the problems. And you can find everything on our website at momsforamerica.us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. Keep up the good work. And I am so glad to see how the tables have turned. Thank you.
Right? It's about time moms get a win.
It's about time. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. You know, it just doesn't end with the Southern Poverty Law Center. I do hope that we see the lawsuits that need to come from those who have been falsely accused. I mean, you got to think about this. This is Jussie Smollett. This is Jussie Smollett, but in a massive scale. Tim Cook of Apple was one of the primary investors into the Southern Poverty Law Center. You know how much money he has? I did find the timing of his resignation from Apple very interesting. You know, he just resigned a couple of weeks ago, retired from Apple just a couple of weeks ago. He was one of the primary donors to that organization. So this is going to be interesting to watch and see how it plays out. But I think what we're learning is I just really had no idea. They have to continue to feed the cause. They have to continue to find relevance in these organizations that promote, you know, destruction. They support separation in our society. They're constantly calling for divisions and tribes and tribal mentality. They're calling for racial wars. I mean, when I think about what happened with all of the summer of love, right? 2020, 2021, the summers of love, and knowing that so much of that was manufactured by the SPLC and the Black Lives Matter organizations, knowing it was manufactured was not genuine. We don't hate each other. They manufactured all of that. Then we heard the rhetoric, you know, the people are coming out of the woods with their lanterns, you know, coming to stalk and kill people. It was insane. Joe Biden repeated that lie that came straight from the SPLC. So here we are. The tables have turned. They've been indicted. They are looking at serious, serious criminal charges. And I, for one, voted for this. We'll be right back.